Did you guys see Trump freaking out? He had just watched this interview. That's what he was so upset about. It wasn't Iran or Israel. It was because Mark Carney is the Trump whisperer now.
Oh, yeah. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Mark Carney is the Trump whisperer now. Like, he's saying that he's not, but he paid CNN to ask him that question. It's ridiculous what's happening, man.
Of taking the place of the striking Canadians. What?
Gang, we thought David Cochrane was bad? Because he is. CBC is awful. Rosie? Come on. Vasi Capello, CTV? Awful. But here we go. CNN still takes the cake, man. They broadcast this stuff to the world. Prime Minister Mark Carney is here with Christiane Amanpour. She is brutal. She's been around as long as I can remember. From my childhood. I'm not young. And boy, oh boy, she lathers it up real thick for Carney. We'll jump right into it. It's off the hook right away. It doesn't get better. My oh my. Show this to somebody. It's crazy. Like, share, subscribe. Watch this.
Let's move on to Canada's desire, because you said a lot, Canada will lead. You want to help lead, form new coalitions. You've said, in fact, if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will. Try to build a coalition of like-minded nations with like-minded values, etc., and who believe in international cooperation. What does that look like? And is that something that will trigger President Trump into more anger? He's already got these tariffs, and he's already said, if you guys essentially try to gang up on me, you'll have to pay for it even more dearly.
I think we have to look at this in the way we would like to lead, the way European Union would like to lead, a number of Asian countries as well, is in a positive respect. If the U.S. is pulling back from multilateralism, as it is with respect to trade, these are effectively, U.S. trade policy is now bilateral. If the U.S. is pulling back, there are others of us who do believe in multilateralism. So, as you know, literally, I'm coming here in the last 12 hours ago. I was in Brussels, agreeing at the Canada-EU summit, agreeing a very comprehensive partnership and a process to have an ever closer economic, defense, and security partnership between Canada and the EU. That is an example of two jurisdictions, in the case of the EU, that believe in multilateralism, believe in the rule of law, believe in fair and open trade, believe in defense cooperation. So that's an example of leadership, if you will, that's positive. It's not it's a reaction, if you will, to what's happening in the United States. But it's not a reaction against the United States. It's for something, not against.
But President Trump tends to be A, transactional, and B, very personal. And sometimes he thinks, or maybe you know differently. Apparently, they say that you're the Trump whisperer of the leaders.
I'm not
and
sure
that you're on
but
texting, relations with him, and you're constantly talking. So is he still saying he wants to annex Canada?
He's not. He's not. He admires Canada, I think it's fair to say, and maybe for a period of time coveted Canada. But
you've put that to bed.
Well, look, we're two sovereign nations who are discussing the future of our trade relationships, our defense partnership, which has been very strong in the past. How is that going to evolve? But again, I would say it this way: the president is focused on a series of changing bilateral relations. We're at NATO. He's been focused on making sure that all members, Canada included, of NATO pay their fair share, carry their weight. I think we are now doing that. We've made major investments in defense in recent months. We're now at the NATO 2%. We're committed to accelerating that. We've got this new defense partnership with Europe as another example. That's other countries stepping up. I don't see that is at all. I think that's positive we're doing it for our own reasons, but I think it's positive for the U.S. relationship, not something that.
But it's pretty sudden and it's pretty overnight. The whole dumping you in the, now we have to take care of our own security, and not only that, we have to help prevent this increasing invasion by a hostile force in Europe, Russia, against, a democratic, sovereign, independent state. Suddenly, it's all been landed on your lap. So how realistic is it in a time when you already have economic difficulties, so does some, Europe and others, to actually, you're at 2%, but now they want 3.5% and eventually 5%. Isn't that just going to cripple your budgets?
You don't care.
It's important. These are important questions, and it's important to be clear what we are potentially, and I think likely to all agree tomorrow, which is, and let's take the 5% of GDP figure, which is a huge chunk. Big number.
How much is it actually for you?
5% of our GDP would be about $150 billion.
I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot of numbers.
Put a change to a bank.
That's a lot.
Of course, it
so
is
it means
a lot.
that's stuff that you can't give to your own citizens.
Well, okay, but here, let's start to break it down. So part of it, a little less than a third of that overall number is spending on things that, quite frankly, we're already doing to build the resilience of our economy. So it can be domestic resilience. It can be defending in areas that support defense, but also support other things. So I'll give an example. Critical minerals. It is obvious, I think, to everyone now, the risk that's run being fully dependent on China for critical minerals, including rare earths, magnets, and others, not just for defense industry, but for the auto industry and others. Canada has one of the biggest and most varied deposits of critical minerals,
which Trump was coveting.
We are going to develop those. We're going to develop those in Canadian interests. We're going to develop some of them in partnership with the European Union itself and European Union member states, with the UK, other partners. Some of the spending for that counts towards that 5%. In fact, a lot of it will count towards that 5% because it's infrastructure spending, it's ports and railroads and other ways to get these minerals out. So that's something that benefits the Canadian economy, but is also part of our NATO, our new NATO responsibilities. So I'm not trying to downplay it. I think the other thing I would say is where we sit today, collectively, we NATO countries are likely to agree to the other component of that 2% going to the 3.5% in 10 years. But the nature of warfare is changing very rapidly. We just look at what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, you don't need an aircraft carrier anymore. Well, some do, but most of us don't. You need drones, and you need the integration of drones with your cyber capabilities, your broader satellite capabilities. We're making a commitment, but we're not locking ourselves in. We're not signing a bunch of post-dated checks for the hardware, military hardware of today to protect our citizens.
Talking about Ukraine, which is the war in Europe, and the existential war, frankly, as Europeans see it, and obviously as Ukraine sees it. You have a massive Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, and the world was incredibly on Ukraine's side for so long. It's almost like now it's an afterthought. President Zelensky was essentially, I'm going to say these words, stood up by President Trump at your G7. I mean, Trump left before he even met Zelensky. I don't know whether he's coming and they're going to meet here. But if the United States walks away, don't you think Russia will win?
No. The short answer, no.
Really?
I don't think,
can you make up for the weapons that...
Well, we can't fully make up, but we can... first off, I don't think the U.S. is going to, quote, walk away.
Do you think it'll keep... do you think Trump will keep giving weapons to Ukraine?
I'll leave that to the U.S. to determine, but there's other measures that can be taken. So first off, have we forgotten about Ukraine? Absolutely not. As you just mentioned, President Zelensky was at the G7. At the G7, Canada announced a major package of new financial sanctions against Russia, major defense support, major support for the Ukraine budget. The European Union is launching its 18th package of sanctions, which will have very significant impacts on the financial sector in Russia. There is
But not the U.S., which is the most
the
powerful.
U.S. There is a sanction package working its way through the Senate. Lindsey Graham is sponsoring that, and if it is enacted, which is a choice, but it will be a game changer. So the U.S., even without military is hugely important here. It is a war.
Are you going to try to persuade Trump to keep supporting Ukraine
Yes.
militarily?
Yes, absolutely. Because it is. It's not. Yes, we have a diaspora, and it's, of course, that's important, and there's personal ties. But this is about rule of law. It's about territorial integrity. It's about support for democracy, and it has it does have those wider implications. It's also it has real security implications for much of Europe. We are at NATO. We have. Under Article 5, we have responsibilities to each other. We take those responsibilities seriously. That's why we're here. So there's many, many factors. Personally, I think in Canada, we would start and stop at the human. We don't need all those other responsibilities in order to supplement or to make the case for supporting Ukraine. Perhaps in the United States, a few other jurisdictions, they need all of those elements, but those elements exist. And so, yes, we'll make a very strong case to the president. Only 9 days ago at the G7, we all agreed, President Trump included, that resolution of the crisis with Iran should be accompanied by a broader reduction of hostilities in the region, including, these are exact words, including a ceasefire in Gaza.
Does that mean that President Trump could use his leverage on Israel to actually go to a meaningful plan, which was in the offing before Trump was inaugurated, for the Israeli forces to come out, for an Arab force and internationals to go in and to start a reasonable conversation?
Let's start with the basics, given the dire situation there in Gaza, which is the
siege,
the need for a ceasefire now, a full resumption. I know there's some, but a full resumption of humanitarian aid, and then moving forward from that. I'm not jumping all the way to a broader peace plan, and accompanied to this. Lest anyone think I'm not acknowledging this, is release of the hostages. And there is the possibility of that created again in the current circumstances. So the question is to keep the focus on that and move forward if at all possible. Well, the first,
And do you think President Trump, I know you said that you all signed this communique at the G7, but, President Trump, I think he's defined by uncertainty. We don't really know what he's going to say next. Do you think that he is really, in your private conversations or your conversations, is he committed to relieving this situation in the Middle East in a fair and just way?
Well, I think he has the potential to be decisive in the situation. He's used his influence and U.S. power in other situations. We've just seen it in Iran. And again, to repeat myself, it does create the possibility of moving forward here. And look, there is a moral imperative to move forward. There's also an imperative, as you intimated in a question earlier, about the pathway to ultimate peace. This is not going to lead to ultimate peace in the region unless Gaza is stabilized and then ultimately on a path towards a Palestinian state.
On that note, Prime Minister Carney, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah.
All right, gang, what do you think about all that? CNN still takes the cake. CBC is awful. David Cochrane, terrible. Vassie Capello, CTV, brutal. All these things, global, not even worth a mention, but they're terrible too. CNN, they're number one. They do it for the whole world. The world is seeing that, and that's how Carney is selling Canada. And man, he's using our money to motor his mouth. It's embarrassing and scary. He won the election, guys. Everybody's in denial about the things that he'll do. He won the election. We're in big trouble. Almost a majority. Like, share, subscribe. Aaron, Canadian Looney. We're approaching 30,000 subscribers. Love to get there as soon as possible. Smash that subscribe. Share this with somebody. Man, we'll be covering Canadian federal politics Get yours right here. Catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.
Let.
Oh, yeah.